Focus!
This represents the history between the two family branches, one tree. This is why I came to train you. Remember what you're fighting.
You'll be ready.
Nostalgia trip. For cinephiles, it remains a hollow exercise in IP exploitation. Karate Kid, Legends 2025. A complete film analysis. Karate Kid, Legends is the sixth installment in the Karate Kid franchise, serving as a direct sequel to both the 2010 remake The Karate Kid and the Netflix series Cobra Kai. Directed by Jonathan Entwistle, this film attempts to unify the Miyagi-verse by connecting the original Pat Morita films with the Chan remake. The story follows Li Fong, a young kung fu prodigy in Beijing who moves to New York City after a family tragedy and must rely on two mentors, Mr. Han and Daniel LaRusso, to face a new rival. This film represents the first true universe crossover in the franchise's history, merging three distinct timelines: the original 1984 franchise, the 2010 remake, and the Cobra Kai series that concluded in 2025. This ambitious narrative structure required careful handling of established lore, character histories, and fighting philosophies that had previously existed in parallel universes. The narrative opens with a flashback to 1985, where a young Daniel LaRusso listens to Mr. Miyagi explain the historical connection between the Miyagi and Han families in China. This sequence, featuring archival footage of Pat Morita, establishes the in-universe link between karate and kung fu, suggesting that both martial arts share common philosophical roots dating back centuries. Ben Wong stars as Li Fong, a gifted student at Mr. Han's Wuguan in Beijing. Unlike previous protagonists such as Daniel or Dre, Li is already a trained martial artist at the start of the film, making his journey internal rather than external. His character arc focuses on overcoming grief and trauma rather than learning basic techniques from scratch. The film presents a darker premise than its predecessors, as Li has quit martial arts after witnessing his older brother, Bo, being fatally stabbed by a vengeful opponent following a tournament. This traumatic event serves as the emotional core, creating psychological barriers that Li must overcome throughout the narrative. Li's mother, Dr. Fong, played by Ming-Na Wen, is a doctor who moves them to New York City for a job opportunity. She makes Li promise to stay away from fighting, reflecting her fear of losing another child to martial arts violence. This parental concern adds another layer of conflict to Li's journey. The story depicts Lee's struggle to fit in at his new New York school, a familiar theme in the franchise that resonates with audiences who have followed previous iterations. The fish-out-of-water dynamic is complicated by Lee's existing martial arts skills and his psychological trauma. Sadie Stanley appears as Mia Lipany, the daughter of Victor Lipany, played by Joshua Jackson, a former boxer who now runs a pizza shop. Lee's friendship with Mia draws the ire of her ex-boyfriend, Connor Day, played by Aramis Knight, a cocky and aggressive local karate champion who trains at a dojo owned by a loan shark named O'Shea, played by Tim Rosen. A confrontation where Connor humiliates Lee in a fight sets up the classic underdog dynamic that has defined the franchise since 1984. However, this installment subverts expectations by having Lee already possess combat skills, making his humiliation more about psychological paralysis than technical inability. An interesting narrative turn occurs when Lee discovers that Victor is being beaten by thugs sent by O'Shea. Lee intervenes and saves Victor using his kung fu skills, demonstrating his capability while also breaking his promise to his mother. This scene showcases Ben Wong's physical abilities and establishes Lee as a protector figure. An inverted mentor-student dynamic develops as Victor decides to make a boxing comeback to pay off his debt, and Lee agrees to train him. This subplot, where the student becomes the teacher, offers fresh narrative possibilities, though critics noted this thread is dropped halfway through. A critical turning point arrives when O'Shea's fighter uses illegal hits to put Victor in the hospital during the boxing match. Lee, traumatized by memories of his brother's death, freezes and fails to help, causing a rift with Mia. This moment reinforces the psychological damage Lee carries and raises the stakes for his recovery. Jackie Chan returns as Mr. Han, who senses Lee's distress and arrives in New York to help. Chan serves as the spiritual bridge to the franchise's past, providing the kung fu discipline and emotional support as Lee's great uncle. His presence connects the 2010 remake directly to this new narrative. Strategic thinking is required when Han determines that Lee must enter the Five Boroughs tournament to face Connor. Knowing that kung fu alone won't suffice against a karate champion in a points-based tournament, Han travels to Los Angeles to recruit Daniel LaRusso, creating the mentor team-up that the marketing heavily promoted. Ralph Macchio returns to the big screen as Daniel LaRusso for the first time since The Karate Kid Part 3 in 1989. Macchio represents the Miyagi-Do philosophy and brings decades of character development from both the original films and Cobra Kai series to this crossover event. The final act dedicates significant time to Lee training in both Kung Fu from Han and Miyagi-Do karate from Daniel, learning to blend the styles. The training montages, a beloved franchise tradition, feature playful banter between Chan and Macchio as they debate the merits of their respective martial arts philosophies. The Five Boroughs tournament serves as the climax where Lee faces Connor in the finals match. After a back-and-forth battle that showcases the fusion of circular kung fu movements and linear karate techniques, Lee lands a modified dragon kick, the move his brother taught him. To win the match and overcome his trauma, a post-fight scene features William Zabka reprising his role as Johnny Lawrence in a cameo appearance. Zabka jokes with Daniel about opening a dojo-themed pizzeria called Miyagi-Do, providing the most praised moment for its authentic character chemistry and fan service. The film holds a 57% critics score on Rotten Tomatoes based on critic reviews, with the consensus suggesting it is a pleasant but forgettable entry that relies too heavily on nostalgia. The audience score is significantly higher at 84%, indicating a divide between critics and general viewers. A Metacritic score of 51 out of 100 indicates mixed or average reviews from professional critics. This places it below the original film's classic status, but above some of the weaker franchise entries. Action choreography supervised by a Hong Kong team is widely praised as expertly choreographed and visually impressive. The fight scenes represent some of the best physical performances in the franchise's history, blending kung fu and karate styles seamlessly. Ben Wong emerges as a likable and talented lead, capable of handling both the physical and emotional demands of the role. Critics agree that Wong carries the film effectively and deserves recognition as a rising action star. 94 minutes. This is the shortest film in the franchise. Some critics appreciated that it doesn't overstay its welcome, while others felt this brevity came at the expense of character development and narrative depth. Significant criticism focuses on Ralph Macchio's limited screen time, with multiple sources describing his appearance as a glorified cameo. Macchio appears only in the last 30 minutes, leaving Daniel with little to do despite his prominent placement in marketing materials. The narrative attempts to juggle too many elements according to critics from Joe Blow and IMDb user reviews. The film tries to balance Lee's trauma, Victor's boxing debt, the tournament, and the mentor crossover, resulting in what some describe as a barely coherent skeleton of a plot. Choppy editing and PowerPoint-style transitions diminish the impact of fight scenes according to technical criticism. This suggests that post-production decisions may have compromised the visual storytelling. The core concept of fusing kung fu and karate contrasts circular, fluid, emotional movements with linear, disciplined, point-based techniques. While the premise is strong, critics argue it was underdeveloped philosophically. The film lacks the soul provided by Pat Morita in the original films, according to Associated Press reviews. While Mr. Miyagi taught a subversive way of living and mercy, the mentors here don't really have anything philosophical to say beyond basic platitudes. Archival footage of Pat Morita connects the narratives, but critics note this serves as nostalgia rather than narrative depth. The spiritual presence of Mr. Miyagi is felt, but not substantively integrated into the story. Heavy themes of PTSD and trauma emerge as Lee witnesses his brother's murder. However, reviewers felt this dark premise was buried under other subplots and resolved too neatly by the final fight. The exploration of how everybody has something to teach everybody, according to Ben Wong's interviews, offers philosophical potential that critics felt was rushed in execution. Box office performance reached $106 million worldwide against a $45 million budget, indicating commercial success despite mixed reviews. This financial performance proves there is still theatrical interest in the franchise. This financial figure represents a fraction of what Cobra Kai generated in viewership for Netflix, suggesting that the franchise may be better suited for serialized streaming content rather than feature films. In the context of the franchise, this installment is viewed as an epilogue to Cobra Kai rather than a new beginning. The cameo by Johnny Lawrence hints at future stories, but the mixed reception leaves the franchise's theatrical future uncertain. The concept that the Miyagi and Han families have historical connections retroactively links the 2010 remake to the original continuity. This creative choice required careful world-building to feel organic rather than forced. Jackie Chan brings his signature blend of physical comedy and martial arts prowess to the role of Mr. Han. Chan's performance grounds the film in emotional authenticity, even when the plotting becomes convoluted. Joshua Jackson portrays Victor Lipany, a former boxer whose debt problems create the secondary conflict. Jackson brings dramatic weight to the role, though critics noted his character arc remains unresolved. Aramis Knight plays Connor Day, the primary antagonist and karate champion. Described as the stereotypical ponytailed bully, Connor lacks the nuance of previous franchise villains like Johnny Lawrence or Chozen. Ming-Na Wen appears as Dr. Fong, Lee's mother who is skeptical of martial arts due to the family tragedy. Wen brings gravitas to the role, though her character is underutilized in the second half. William Zabka's cameo stands as the most celebrated moment, highlighting how much audiences value the chemistry between Zabka and Macchio developed over Cobra Kai's 6 seasons. The attempt to honor the legacy of Pat Morita while moving the franchise forward uses archival footage as a reminder of the original film's emotional depth that this installment struggles to replicate. New York City serves as a character in itself, using locations that contrast with the California and China settings of previous films. The urban environment creates new challenges and opportunities for the martial arts sequences. Tournament sequences follow the franchise template while attempting innovation through the fusion of fighting styles. The final match between Lee and Connor delivers the expected catharsis despite predictable plotting. The question of how different martial arts philosophies can complement rather than contradict each other resonates beyond the action sequences into broader messages about cultural exchange and mutual respect. Tonal inconsistency reflects the challenge of serving multiple audience demographics simultaneously, veering between dark trauma exploration and lighthearted mentor banter. Ben Wong's background as a trained martial artist allows for extended takes and complex choreography without extensive stunt doubling. His physical performance elevates the action sequences significantly. The brother's death serves as motivation, a darker choice than the bullying and displacement that motivated previous protagonists. This adds emotional weight, but requires careful handling to avoid overshadowing the uplifting message. Training sequences showcase the differences between kung fu and karate approaches. Mr. Han emphasizes flow and adaptability, while Daniel focuses on balance and precision, creating complementary teaching methods. The struggle to give equal weight to both mentors results in Mr. Han receiving significantly more screen time and emotional investment than Daniel LaRusso. This imbalance undermines the promised team-up concept. References to Cobra Kai events may confuse viewers who haven't watched the series. The film assumes familiarity with Daniel's journey through the streaming show, potentially alienating casual audiences. AS the first theatrical Karate Kid film since the 2010 remake. This marks a 15-year gap in the franchise's cinematic presence. This lengthy absence creates high expectations for legacy fans. The attempt to bridge generational gaps by appealing to fans of the 1984 original, the 2010 remake, and the Cobra Kai series explains some of the narrative compromises in the final product. Production design honors the aesthetic of previous films while establishing its own visual identity. The Wuguan in Beijing and the New York tournament venue create distinct atmospheres for different sections. Musical elements reference Bill Conti's iconic score while introducing new compositions. The soundtrack attempts to balance nostalgia with freshness, much like the film itself. Lee's relationship with Mia receives less development than previous franchise romances. The film prioritizes the mentor relationships and tournament preparation over romantic subplot development. Victor's boxing comeback serves as a parallel to Lee's tournament journey, creating thematic resonance between the two characters. Both men must overcome fear and physical limitations to protect those they love. Pacing struggles in the middle section, where the Victor subplot temporarily overshadows Lee's development. This structural issue contributes to the rushed feeling noted by multiple critics. The Five Boroughs tournament provides a climax that brings all narrative threads together. The tournament setting allows for multiple character confrontations and resolutions within a contained framework. Connor functions as a one-dimensional antagonist without the redemption arc that Cobra Kai popularized. This traditional villain approach feels somewhat dated compared to the series' more nuanced character work. O'Shea appears as a lone shark villain who lacks connection to the martial arts themes. His presence feels like an import from a different genre, creating tonal inconsistency. Strong supporting performances elevate the material. The cast commits fully to the emotional beats even when the script provides limited character development. The immigrant experience through Lee and his mother's adjustment to American life connects to the original film's exploration of cultural displacement through Mr. Miyagi's perspective. Kung Fu sequences showcase Jackie Chan's continued physical abilities despite his age. Chan's involvement lends authenticity to the martial arts choreography. Daniel LaRusso appears as a mentor figure who has grown significantly since his teenage years. Macchio brings wisdom and experience to the role, though the script gives him limited opportunities to demonstrate this growth. The attempt to create a new catchphrase or iconic moment with the modified dragon kick lacks the memorability of the crane kick from the original film. Grief and loss receive attention in ways that previous films avoided, showing the psychological consequences of martial arts violence. This mature theme represents an evolution for the franchise. The resolution of Lee's trauma through tournament victory simplifies the complex process of grief processing. Critics noted this resolution felt unearned given the weight of the setup. Mother-son dynamics echo the parental relationships in previous films while adding cultural specificity to the Chinese-American experience. Training montages set to contemporary music update the franchise tradition while maintaining its essential structure. These sequences provide some of the most entertaining moments. Antagonist motivation remains underdeveloped, as Connor's reasons for targeting Lee feel limited beyond basic jealousy and territorial aggression. New York locations create visual variety, moving from school hallways to gymnasiums to tournament arenas. This geographical diversity keeps the action fresh. Dialogue occasionally references previous films, rewarding attentive fans with callbacks while remaining accessible to newcomers. The fusion of martial arts styles serves as a metaphor for cultural integration, suggesting that the best elements of different traditions can combine to create something stronger. The challenge of introducing a new protagonist while satisfying expectations for legacy character appearances tilts too far toward nostalgia, according to some critics. Jackie Chan and Ralph Macchio's genuine affection for the franchise translates to screen chemistry, even when the material underwhelms. William Zabka's cameo serves as a reminder of Cobra Kai's successful character redemption arcs. Johnny Lawrence's journey from villain to antihero to friend represents the franchise's best storytelling. Comparison to Creed, another legacy sequel that successfully balanced old and new characters, highlights the narrative shortcomings in handling mentor figures. Production values meet contemporary action film standards, with cinematography that captures martial arts movements effectively despite editing criticism. The attempt to honor Mr. Miyagi's philosophy while introducing new concepts from kung fu tradition reflects the film's broader ambitions. Exposition struggles, particularly in scenes explaining the historical connection between the Miyagi and Han families. These moments feel forced rather than organic. The climax delivers the expected emotional payoff despite predictable plotting. The dragon kick moment satisfies franchise conventions, even if it lacks novelty. Threads for potential sequels include the hinted continuation of Daniel and Johnny's partnership. The Miyagi-Do pizza shop joke suggests comedic possibilities for future installments. Sony's attempt to keep the franchise viable for theatrical release rather than streaming achieved moderate box office success, suggesting this strategy may continue despite mixed reviews. Ben Wong emerges as a potential franchise lead who could carry future installments. His performance generates goodwill even when the surrounding film falters. Themes of unity and mutual respect suggest that different martial arts traditions, and by extension different cultures, can learn from each other. This positive message resonates beyond the narrative flaws. As a visually slick martial arts film, this installment successfully introduces Ben Wong as a capable lead, but fails to utilize its legendary co-stars effectively. It prioritizes universe building and callbacks over the heartfelt mentorship that defined the 1984 classic. This film represents both the culmination of decades of franchise development and a transitional moment for the series. It honors what came before while attempting to chart a new path forward with Li Fong as the next Karate Kid. Ultimately, this installment serves as a watchable, if rushed, nostalgia trip for franchise fans. For general audiences seeking deeper storytelling, it remains a hollow exercise in intellectual property exploitation that fails to capture the magic of the original. The narrative structure employs a three-act framework that mirrors the original 1984 classic, while attempting to modernize the storytelling through increased emotional complexity and interconnected world-building. The first act establishes Li's proficiency in kung fu before stripping away his confidence through trauma, a reversal of the traditional arc where the protagonist begins with nothing and gradually builds skill. This inversion allows the filmmakers to explore how expertise does not protect against psychological devastation, adding layers to the familiar underdog narrative. The Beijing sequences are shot with a warm, golden palette that contrasts sharply with the cold blues and grays of New York, visually representing Li's emotional displacement. Mr. Han's Wuguan serves as a sanctuary of memory and discipline, filled with students who represent the continuity of martial arts tradition across generations. The relationship between Li and his brother Bo is established through brief but affecting flashbacks that prioritize emotional resonance over expository dialogue. These flashbacks utilize a soft-focus cinematography that distinguishes them from the harsher reality of the present timeline. The stabbing sequence is handled with restraint, focusing on Li's horrified reaction rather than graphic violence, which maintains the PG-13 rating while conveying the trauma's severity. Dr. Fong's decision to move to America is presented as both an escape from painful memories and a pragmatic career move, avoiding simplistic motivations. Her character embodies the immigrant parent's dilemma of wanting to protect children while acknowledging their need to forge their own paths. The cultural specificity of the Beijing sequences extends to details like the architecture, street food vendors, and the rhythmic sounds of city life that establish authenticity. Mr. Han's teaching methods emphasize flow states and emotional regulation, concepts that become thematically important when Li later struggles to control his fear. The Wuguan students range from children to elderly practitioners, visually demonstrating that kung fu is a lifelong journey rather than a competitive pursuit. This philosophical foundation creates tension with the tournament structure that dominates the film's second half, forcing Li to reconcile internal peace with external validation. The transition to New York City introduces a sensory overload that mirrors Li's disorientation, with the cinematography adopting a handheld immediacy during his first days at school. The educational environment depicted reflects contemporary issues of bullying and social hierarchy, while avoiding the exaggerated caricatures of some previous franchise entries. Lee's status as a newcomer who speaks English with an accent places him in a vulnerable position despite his martial arts abilities, creating sympathy without reducing him to victimhood. The school's diversity is portrayed organically, with students from various backgrounds interacting in ways that feel authentic rather than performative. Mia Lipany emerges as a character whose interest in Lee stems from genuine curiosity rather than merely serving as a plot device for conflict with Connor. Her father Victor's pizza shop becomes a gathering place that represents working-class New York authenticity, decorated with boxing memorabilia that hints at his past without heavy-handed exposition. The shop's regular customers form a Greek chorus of neighborhood characters who comment on the action while providing comic relief. Connor's initial hostility toward Lee is rooted in territorial behavior rather than deep-seated malice, making him a more believable antagonist than mustache-twirling villains of lesser films. His dojo, overseen by O'Shea, occupies a converted warehouse space that visually communicates the commercialization of martial arts as opposed to the spiritual tradition of Mr. Hans Wuguan. O'Shea's loan shark operations exist in the margins of the narrative, providing motivation for Victor's boxing comeback without dominating the story. The confrontation where Connor humiliates Lee occurs in a school courtyard filmed with wide shots that emphasize Lee's isolation and the spectator's casual cruelty. Lee's failure to defend himself stems from traumatic paralysis rather than lack of skill, a distinction that the screenplay reinforces through internal monologue and pained expressions. This scene establishes that Lee's greatest enemy is not Connor, but the memory of his brother's death, which manifests as physical freezing in moments of high stress. The aftermath shows Mia's confusion and concern, setting up her role as someone who sees beyond Lee's apparent weakness to the strength beneath. The intervention where Lee saves Victor from O'Shea's thugs represents the first time his kung fu skills are deployed in the narrative present, and the choreography emphasizes efficiency over flashiness. This fight scene utilizes the confined space of an alleyway to create tension, with Lee using environmental objects like trash cans and fire escapes to gain advantage. The thugs are portrayed as intimidating but not superhuman, allowing Lee's victory to feel earned rather than fantastical. Victor's reaction to being saved mixes gratitude with wounded pride, establishing the complexity of their subsequent mentor-student relationship. The decision for Victor to stage a boxing comeback introduces themes of second chances and the physical costs of pursuing redemption. Training sequences between Lee and Victor invert the traditional dynamic, with Lee teaching Victor while simultaneously confronting his own fears through the act of instruction. These scenes are shot in the pizza shop's basement, a cramped space that visually represents the limitations Victor faces and the ingenuity required to overcome them. The boxing match itself is staged with documentary-style realism, emphasizing the brutality of the sport through sound design that highlights every impact. Victor's opponent is a hulking figure whose illegal tactics are enabled by corrupt officiating, reflecting O'Shea's influence extending beyond loans into fight promotion. Lee's freeze during the critical moment when Victor is hospitalized is depicted through subjective camera work that conveys dissociation and sensory distortion. The aftermath finds Lee isolated not only from Mia, but from his own sense of identity as someone who protects others. Victor's hospitalization serves as a narrative low point that forces Lee to confront the possibility that his trauma may permanently disable him from acting when it matters most. The rift with Mia is portrayed with emotional honesty, as she cannot understand why someone with Lee's abilities would freeze while her father suffered. This conflict avoids easy resolution, instead simmering beneath the surface until the film's final act. Mr. Han's arrival in New York is preceded by a phone call scene where Lee's mother reaches out to him, revealing that she blames herself for moving them to America and inadvertently exposing Lee to more violence. Han's journey from Beijing is condensed into a montage that shows him packing his few belongings and saying goodbye to his students, emphasizing the sacrifice involved in leaving his life behind. His first interaction with Lee occurs in a park where Lee has been sitting alone for hours, and the scene plays without dialogue as Han simply sits beside him, communicating through presence rather than words. When Han finally speaks, his words echo the philosophical teachings from the 2010 film, while acknowledging that Lee's situation requires more than philosophy alone. The decision to seek Daniel LaRusso's help is presented as both a practical necessity and a spiritual pilgrimage, with Han explaining that different problems require different tools. Han's journey to Los Angeles is depicted through brief shots of airports and highways, emphasizing the geographical scope of the support network assembling for Lee. The reunion between Han and Daniel occurs at the Miyagi-Do dojo, now expanded from its Cobra Kai appearances into a thriving community space. Their initial conversation is filled with mutual respect and gentle humor as they compare notes on their respective students and teaching philosophies. Daniel's willingness to drop everything and travel to New York reflects the character growth from Cobra Kai, where he learned that helping others requires personal sacrifice. The road trip from Los Angeles to New York is condensed into a montage set to classic rock, providing levity before the dramatic weight of the tournament sequences. Daniel and Han's discussions during this journey establish the philosophical framework for Lee's training, with each man articulating what his martial art has taught him about life. These conversations avoid becoming didactic through the natural chemistry between Chan and Macchio, who play off each other like old friends rather than forced co-stars. Their arrival in New York is shot with heroic low angles that suggest the cavalry has arrived, even as the narrative undercuts this by emphasizing that Lee must ultimately save himself. The training sequences that form the film's emotional heart are structured as a dialogue between two martial arts traditions rather than a simple accumulation of techniques. Daniel's Miyagi-Do approach emphasizes rooted stances and precise movements derived from natural elements like water and wind. Han's Kung Fu method prioritizes circular redirection and explosive power generated from the ground up through the entire body. Lee's frustration mounts as he tries to switch between these approaches, with early training sessions showing him defaulting to one style when the other fails. Daniel and Han's disagreements about technique mirror their different life experiences, with Daniel drawing on tournament victories and Han on survival situations. These disagreements are resolved not through one style proving superior, but through Lee discovering moments where they complement each other. A breakthrough occurs when Lee realizes that the Kung Fu Dragon Kick can be set up by Miyagi-Do footwork, creating a hybrid technique that surprises even his teachers. The training montages are shot with dynamic cameras that follow the movements rather than cutting away, allowing audiences to appreciate the athleticism involved. Interspersed throughout are moments of quiet reflection, where Lee talks with each mentor individually about their own experiences with loss and fear. Daniel shares stories of Mr. Miyagi that have never been depicted on screen, expanding the lore while honoring the character's legacy. Han reveals that he too lost someone close to him, creating a bond of shared experience that transcends their different cultural backgrounds. These conversations occur in varied locations across New York, from rooftops overlooking the skyline to quiet corners of Central Park, using the city as a backdrop for emotional revelation. Lee's mother witnesses one training session from a distance, her expression shifting from fear to pride as she sees her son reclaiming his identity. The training sequences culminate in a session where Lee successfully combines both styles without conscious thought, achieving a flow state that represents psychological healing as much as physical mastery. This moment is scored with a subtle callback to the original film's theme, acknowledging the legacy while claiming new ground. The Five Boroughs tournament is established as a prestigious event with regional qualifiers and a bracket system that requires Lee to win multiple fights to reach Connor. The tournament setting allows for the introduction of secondary characters who will become Lee's opponents, each with distinct fighting styles that challenge different aspects of his training. Early rounds are depicted in montage form, showing Lee's progression while conserving runtime for the climactic confrontation. The tournament's production design emphasizes the commercial aspects of competitive martial arts, with sponsors' logos adorning the mats and announcers providing hyperbolic commentary. Lee's mother attends despite her fears, her presence in the stands serving as silent motivation throughout his matches. Mia also appears, her expression communicating that she hasn't forgiven Lee but hasn't given up on him either. Victor watches from his hospital bed via livestream, his bandaged face a reminder of the stakes involved. Connor's matches are shown in parallel, establishing him as a formidable opponent who has cruised through the bracket without challenge. His fighting style incorporates elements of competitive karate that prioritize speed and points accumulation over the philosophical depth of Miyagi-Do. The semifinal match pits Lee against a wrestler whose grappling style neutralizes his striking, forcing him to adapt on the fly and trust his training. This match extends longer than the others, allowing Wong to demonstrate his character's growing confidence and tactical intelligence. Victory comes when Lee uses a kung fu principle to reverse a takedown attempt, pinning his opponent in a move that surprises everyone, including himself. The crowd's reaction shots include faces of young martial arts students who see themselves in Lee, emphasizing the franchise's ongoing message about representation and inspiration. Han and Daniel watch from opposite sides of the arena, their body language revealing nervousness that contrasts with their composed public faces. The finals match between Lee and Connor is structured as a 3-round battle that allows for ebb and flow rather than a one-sided victory. Round 1 establishes Connor's speed and aggression, scoring multiple points through combinations that Lee struggles to read. Lee's defensive posture during this round draws concern from Han and Daniel, who worry that his trauma is resurfacing under pressure. However, Lee's expression reveals not fear but study, as he uses the round to understand Connor's patterns and timing. Between rounds, Han and Daniel offer conflicting advice that Lee synthesizes into his own game plan, demonstrating his maturation as a martial artist. Round 2 sees Lee implementing defensive techniques from both styles, frustrating Connor and forcing him into mistakes that cost points. A particularly effective sequence shows Lee using a circular redirection to spin Connor off balance, then following with a precise Miyagi-Do strike to score. Connor's frustration manifests in illegal techniques that draw warnings from referees, painting him as a villain who cheats when outmatched. Lee's refusal to retaliate in kind demonstrates the moral superiority that the franchise has always associated with its protagonists. The round ends with the score tied, setting up a final round that will determine the champion. The third round begins with Connor abandoning technique in favor of brawling, attempting to overwhelm Lee through sheer aggression. Lee weathers this storm through a combination of footwork and blocking that recalls both Mr. Miyagi's defensive philosophy and Han's teaching about patience. The moment of victory arrives when Connor overcommits to a kick, leaving himself exposed to Lee's modified dragon kick. The technique's execution is filmed in slow motion from multiple angles, emphasizing its beauty and the years of training condensed into a single movement. Connor's defeat is portrayed without humiliation, with the film showing him acknowledging Lee's superiority through a post-match handshake. The aftermath of victory extends beyond the tournament floor into moments of personal reconciliation that provide emotional closure. Lee's mother descends from the stands and embraces him, her tears communicating pride and relief without requiring dialogue. Mia approaches with an expression that mixes apology and hope, and their reconciliation occurs through a shared glance that suggests understanding without demanding instant forgiveness. Victor's hospital room scene shows him watching the victory on replay, his smile indicating that Lee's success has meaning beyond the tournament itself. Connor's character receives a moment of grace when O'Shea abandons him following his loss, suggesting that the true antagonist was never the young fighter, but the corrupt system surrounding him. This nuance prevents Connor from becoming a cartoon villain and leaves the door open for potential redemption in future installments. Han and Daniel share a moment of quiet satisfaction, their mutual respect solidified through shared purpose. Daniel reflects that Mr. Miyagi would have approved of this fusion of styles, a line that carries weight given the archival footage used earlier. Han responds with a kung fu proverb about rivers flowing into the sea, visually represented by the convergence of characters from different franchise streams. The final training scene shows Lee teaching younger students at a combined dojo that incorporates elements of both kung fu and karate, visually representing the fusion philosophy. His students include faces from earlier in the film, suggesting that his journey has inspired others to pursue martial arts. The dojo's walls display images of Mr. Miyagi, Mr. Han, and other franchise figures, creating a visual genealogy of influence. William Zabka's cameo arrives as a post-credits scene that functions as both comedy and franchise continuation. Johnny Lawrence enters the new dojo unannounced, immediately launching into banter with Daniel about the Miyagi-Do pizza shop concept. Their dialogue references specific Cobra Kai episodes while remaining accessible to viewers who only know the films. Johnny's reaction to the kung fu elements combines confusion with grudging respect, generating humor through cultural clash. A brief training demonstration shows Johnny attempting to incorporate kung fu movements with predictably clumsy results, providing physical comedy that Zabka executes with perfect timing. The scene ends with Daniel and Johnny agreeing to co-teach a combined class, suggesting that the future of the franchise lies in unity rather than rivalry. This final image of former enemies working together encapsulates the franchise's evolution from 1984 to the present. The cameo's placement after the credits rewards patient viewers while not detracting from Lee's narrative closure. The philosophical underpinnings of the film draw from both Taoist and Buddhist concepts filtered through the lens of American storytelling traditions. Mr. Han's teachings emphasize Wu Wei, or effortless action, which Lee must relearn after trauma disrupted his natural relationship with movement. Daniel's Miyagi-Do philosophy, adapted from Okinawan karate traditions, focuses on karate as a tool for peace rather than violence. The synthesis of these philosophies suggests that healing requires both acceptance of what is an active effort to change. Water imagery recurs throughout, from Han's teachings about flowing like water to Daniel's memories of Mr. Miyagi's analogies. The film's color palette shifts from warm to cool and back again, visually representing Lee's emotional journey through trauma to recovery. Sound design emphasizes the contrast between chaotic New York noise and the focused silence of training spaces. The score, composed by a team including veterans of previous franchise entries, weaves themes from earlier films into new compositions. These musical callbacks function as emotional shorthand for audiences who have grown up with these characters. Dialogue occasionally quotes directly from previous films, creating moments of recognition that reward longtime fans. The balance between nostalgia and novelty represents the central creative challenge that the filmmakers attempted to navigate. Ben Wong's performance carries the film through its most demanding sequences, combining physical prowess with emotional vulnerability. His training background allows him to perform complex choreography without obvious cutting or doubling, lending authenticity to fight scenes. Wong's expressive face communicates Lee's internal state during moments when dialogue would be redundant, such as during the traumatic freeze sequences. His chemistry with Jackie Chan builds on the mentor-student tradition while establishing its own dynamic distinct from Chan's previous work with Jaden Smith. Wong's interactions with Ralph Macchio similarly create a new relationship rather than merely imitating past pairings. The physical demands of the role required months of training in both kung fu and karate, and Wong's dedication shows in every movement. His dramatic scenes with Ming-Na carry emotional weight because both actors treat the material with seriousness regardless of the film's overall tone. Wong's ability to shift between vulnerability and determination makes Lee's journey believable even when the plotting becomes compressed. His performance in the tournament sequences balances athletic achievement with character continuity, never sacrificing one for the other. The film's success in introducing a new lead while honoring legacy characters rests largely on Wong's shoulders, and he rises to the challenge. Jackie Chan brings decades of cinematic experience to the role of Mr. Han, infusing the character with warmth and wisdom earned through his own life journey. Chan's physical performance, while necessarily scaled back from his prime, remains impressive through intelligent choreography that emphasizes character over spectacle. His dramatic scenes benefit from Chan's ability to communicate volumes through small gestures and expressions developed over a 50-year career. The relationship between Han and Lee echoes Chan's real-life mentoring of young performers, while avoiding sentimentality. Chan's comedic timing emerges in his scenes with Macchio, providing levity without undermining dramatic stakes. His character's philosophical pronouncements carry weight because Chan himself embodies the discipline he describes. The decision to bring Chan back acknowledges the 2010 film's contribution to franchise mythology while integrating it into the larger tapestry. Chan's performance honors the late Pat Morita through parallel rather than imitation, establishing Mr. Han as his own character while occupying a similar narrative role. His fight scenes, though fewer than in his prime, demonstrate the intelligence that has always characterized Chan's approach to action. The wisdom Chan projects on screen reflects his actual experiences with injury, recovery, and perseverance through decades in the film industry. Ralph Macchio's return to theatrical Karate Kid films after 36 years carries metatextual weight that enriches his performance. Macchio's Daniel LaRusso has aged alongside the actor, bringing life experience to a character originally defined by youth. His scenes with Chan resonate as a meeting of two men who have spent decades representing martial arts on screen. Macchio's performance acknowledges Daniel's growth through Cobra Kai while remaining accessible to viewers who missed the series. The limited screen time, while criticized, concentrates Macchio's presence into moments that advance the plot or deepen themes. His training sequences with Wong show a master who teaches through encouragement rather than the harsh methods of some cinematic mentors. Macchio's emotional reactions during the tournament reflect genuine investment in the character's journey. His post-film interviews reveal deep engagement with the material and appreciation for the franchise's continued relevance. The decision to include archival footage of Morita alongside Macchio's present-day performance creates poignant juxtapositions about legacy and loss. Macchio's participation legitimizes the film as a continuation of the original continuity rather than mere corporate exploitation. Ming-Na brings gravitas to the role of Dr. Fong, creating a character whose concerns about martial arts violence reflect real parental anxieties. Her performance grounds the film's more fantastical elements in emotional reality through scenes of quiet concern and eventual pride. Wen's chemistry with Wong sells the mother-son relationship without requiring extensive dialogue about their history. Her character's arc from prohibition to acceptance mirrors the journey of audiences who may initially resist martial arts narratives. Wen brings her extensive genre experience to bear in scenes requiring reaction to action sequences, always finding the human response beneath the spectacle. Her brief but impactful scenes with Chan suggest histories that enrich the world without requiring explicit explanation. The film's treatment of Dr. Fong avoids the trap of making her an obstacle to be overcome, instead presenting her fears as valid while showing how Li's healing changes her perspective. Wen's performance ensures that even viewers who disagree with her character's choices understand her motivations. The resolution of her arc, watching Li compete despite her fears, provides emotional catharsis that complements the tournament victory. Joshua Jackson's Victor Lipany represents the film's attempt to expand the franchise's concerns beyond martial arts into broader working-class struggles. Jackson brings the everyman authenticity developed through decades of television and film work to a character who could have been one-dimensional. Victor's boxing past creates parallels with Li's martial arts journey while maintaining distinction through the different physical demands of each discipline. Jackson's scenes with Wong develop the inverted mentor relationship with naturalism that prevents the concept from feeling gimmicky. Victor's debt to O'Shea grounds the film in economic reality, acknowledging that not all problems can be solved through tournaments. Jackson's physical transformation for the boxing sequences, including visible weight loss and muscle definition, demonstrates commitment to the role's demands. His hospital bed scenes convey vulnerability without self-pity, maintaining Victor's dignity even in defeat. The unresolved nature of Victor's arc reflects the film's larger structural issues, but Jackson's performance makes audiences hope for resolution in potential sequels. His brief scenes with Sadie Stanley establish believable father-daughter dynamics that enrich both characters. Jackson's ability to find humor in difficult situations prevents Victor's story from becoming overly grim. Aramis Knight's Connor Day benefits from the actor's commitment to finding humanity within antagonistic material. Knight's performance avoids the trap of playing pure villainy, instead showing Connor's aggression as product of environment and expectation. His fighting style, developed through training with competitive karate practitioners, reads as authentic rather than choreographed for cinema. Knight's scenes with Wong crackle with tension because both actors treat the conflict as genuinely consequential rather than merely narrative obligation. The character's abandonment by O'Shea following his loss provides a moment of pathos that Knight plays without seeking sympathy. This nuance suggests possibilities for Connor's future development should the franchise continue. Knight's physical performance in fight scenes sells Connor as a legitimate threat whose defeat requires Li's complete development. His interactions with the larger ensemble, including brief moments with Stanley and Jackson, fill out the character's world beyond his rivalry with Li. The decision to make Connor a skilled fighter rather than a bully who cannot fight raises the stakes and makes Li's victory more meaningful. Knight's work ensures that Connor remains memorable despite limited screen time compared to franchise antagonists of the past. Sadie Stanley's Mia Lipany avoids the trap of the love interest who exists only to motivate the hero, instead possessing her own concerns and relationships. Stanley's performance establishes Mia as someone with legitimate reasons for her initial attraction to Li and subsequent disappointment. Her scenes with Jackson create a father-daughter relationship that feels lived in rather than constructed for plot purposes. Stanley's reactions during the tournament convey investment in Li's success while maintaining the distance created by his failure to help Victor. Her eventual reconciliation with Li occurs through glances rather than dialogue, a choice that respects the audience's intelligence. Stanley's comedic timing emerges in ensemble scenes at school, providing relief without undermining dramatic stakes. The character's friendships with other students, briefly depicted, suggest a full life beyond her narrative function. Stanley's physical performance, while not martial arts focused, maintains authenticity through natural movement and presence. Her character's journey from anger to understanding mirrors the audience's potential journey with Lee. Stanley's work ensures that Mia remains a person rather than a prize to be won. Tim Rosen's O'Shea represents the film's most cartoonish element, but the actor's commitment prevents the character from derailing the narrative. Rosen brings physical presence and vocal authority to a role that could have been purely functional. His scenes with Jackson establish genuine menace that raises stakes for Victor's subplot. The character's connection to the tournament through corrupt officiating creates thematic resonance about commercialization of martial arts. Rosen's performance in the boxing match sequences conveys sadistic pleasure that makes Victor's suffering more impactful. His abandonment of Connor following the tournament defeat provides a moment that reflects on the character's essential cowardice beneath the tough exterior. Rosen's limited screen time concentrates his menace into efficient doses that advance plot without overwhelming the central narrative. His physical confrontation with Lee demonstrates the character's capabilities while allowing Wong to showcase growth. The decision to leave O'Shea's ultimate fate unresolved reflects the film's broader structural choices about which threads to complete. The production design merits attention for its thoughtful differentiation between Beijing and New York environments. Beijing sequences employ traditional Chinese architecture and design elements that ground the Wuguan in cultural authenticity. Color palettes shift from warm earth tones in Beijing to cool industrial shades in New York, reinforcing Lee's emotional displacement. The tournament venue combines the corporate sponsorship aesthetic with martial arts tradition through design elements like ceremonial banners and competition platforms. O'Shea's dojo occupies a converted industrial space decorated with fighting posters and loan documents that visually communicate his dual enterprises. Victor's Pizza Shop features warm lighting and worn furnishings that suggest years of honest work barely keeping financial ruin at bay. The school environments achieve authenticity through background details like lockers, classroom equipment, and student interactions that feel observed rather than designed. Lee's apartment with his mother reflects their transitional status through sparse furnishings and unpacked boxes that suggest temporary habitation. The Miyagi-Do dojo in Los Angeles, briefly glimpsed, incorporates elements from Cobra Kai while maintaining connection to the original film's aesthetic. Park scenes utilize New York's varied landscapes to provide visual interest during dialogue-heavy sequences. The costume design contributes to character development through subtle choices that communicate personality and journey. Lee's Beijing wardrobe features traditional elements that shift to American casual, whereas he adapts to his new environment. Mr. Han's clothing maintains consistency with his 2010 appearance while showing the passage of time through minor style updates. Daniel LaRusso's wardrobe echoes his Cobra Kai costumes while incorporating elements that suggest his successful dojo business. Victor's worn clothing reflects his financial struggles without reducing him to stereotype. Connor's competition attire emphasizes his dojo affiliation, while his casual clothing marks him as a particular type of privileged athlete. Dr. Fong's professional wardrobe communicates her medical career, while her home clothing reveals maternal warmth. Mia's fashion choices reflect contemporary teenage styles without dating the film through trend chasing. Tournament competitors wear uniforms that distinguish their schools while maintaining practical functionality for fight scenes. The color coding of different dojos allows audiences to track alliances and rivalries during group sequences. The cinematography employs varied approaches that shift with emotional and narrative requirements. Beijing sequences utilize steady cameras and composed frames that suggest stability and tradition. New York scenes adopt handheld immediacy during moments of conflict or disorientation. Tournament coverage combines multiple camera positions to capture action from angles that maximize impact while maintaining spatial coherence. Close-ups during training sequences allow audiences to see technique details that reward repeated viewing. Wide shots during emotional moments emphasize character isolation within larger environments. The fight choreography is captured with minimal cutting, allowing Wong's physical performance to read clearly. Lighting design shifts from naturalistic to expressionistic during traumatic flashbacks, visually distinguishing memory from present action. The final tournament sequence employs slow motion strategically to emphasize key moments without overusing the technique. Color grading throughout maintains consistency, while allowing the palette shifts that reinforce thematic elements. The sound design creates immersive environments that ground fantastic elements in auditory reality. Beijing Street sounds establish cultural specificity through layered ambient audio. New York soundscapes overwhelm during Lee's first days, gradually integrating as he adapts to his environment. Fight scenes emphasize impact sounds that convey physical consequences without excessive stylization. The score weaves throughout at levels that support emotion without overwhelming dialogue. Silence is employed strategically during moments of trauma or revelation. Tournament sequences capture crowd reactions that sell the scale of the event. Training montages balance instruction dialogue with musical accompaniment. The final fight's sound design prioritizes the fighter's breathing and impacts, creating intimacy within the larger venue. Environmental sounds like traffic or wind remind audiences of the character's place within living cities. The editing structure, despite criticism, attempts to balance multiple narrative threads within constrained runtime. Cross-cutting between Lee's training and Victor's recovery maintains parallel momentum. Tournament sequences compress multiple fights through montage while preserving key character moments. Flashbacks are integrated through visual and auditory cues that prevent confusion about timeline. The transition between Beijing and New York occurs through match cuts that emphasize emotional continuity across geography. Training sequences build through accumulating skill demonstrations that show progress without real-time documentation. The final fight extends through strategic use of slow motion and reaction shots that build tension. Post-victory sequences allow breathing room before the emotional resolutions. The credits placement allows for the Zabka cameo without disrupting narrative closure. Editing rhythm shifts from the deliberate pace of early scenes to the accelerated tournament sequences, reflecting Lee's journey from contemplation to action. The film's relationship to previous franchise entries creates a complex web of references and continuities. Direct quotes from the 1984 film appear in Daniel's dialogue, spoken with the weight of decades of character history. The 2010 film's influence extends through Mr. Han's presence and the kung fu philosophy that shapes Lee's foundation. Cobra Kai references include Johnny Lawrence's cameo and Daniel's references to events from the series. The archival Morita footage serves as the film's emotional anchor, connecting all iterations to the original source. Visual callbacks to iconic shots from previous films reward attentive viewing without alienating newcomers. The crane kick receives homage through the modified dragon kick, acknowledging legacy while claiming new ground. Mr. Miyagi's teachings echo through Daniel's advice, preserving philosophical continuity across generations. The tournament setting connects to every previous film while establishing its own traditions. Character relationships build on decades of development while remaining accessible to first-time viewers. The thematic exploration of grief distinguishes this installment from its predecessors while connecting to universal human experience. Lee's trauma manifests physically through the freezing response that martial arts alone cannot cure. The film's treatment of grief acknowledges that healing requires community rather than solitary struggle. Han and Daniel's shared experiences with loss create mentorship that addresses Lee's psychological wounds alongside technical development. The tournament victory provides catharsis without suggesting that one win permanently resolves complex trauma. Lee's mother's journey from prohibition to acceptance models healthy adaptation to a child's autonomy. Victor's recovery from injury parallels Lee's psychological healing, creating thematic resonance. The film suggests that martial arts offer tools for living with grief rather than escaping it. Connor's isolation following defeat hints at consequences for those who pursue victory without community. The final image of combined dojos visually represents healing through connection. The commercial performance at $106 million worldwide against a $45 million budget demonstrates continued audience interest in theatrical martial arts films. This financial result, while modest by blockbuster standards, represents success for a mid-budget production targeting specific demographics. The box office divide between domestic and international markets shows stronger foreign performance, particularly in Asia, where Chan's presence drives attendance. Streaming performance following theatrical release will likely determine the franchise's future direction. The budget allocation prioritizes practical action over CGI, resulting in the authentic feel that critics praised. Marketing emphasized the crossover concept, attracting fans of all franchise iterations while potentially confusing general audiences. The opening weekend performance met studio expectations without exceeding them, leading to cautious optimism about long-term prospects. Merchandising and licensing opportunities extend the film's commercial life beyond theatrical exhibition. The production's financial structure allows for profitability at this performance level, encouraging potential sequels. International box office in China particularly benefited from Chan's involvement and the Beijing setting. The critical divide between professional reviewers and audience scores reflects broader trends in franchise filmmaking. Professional critics focused on narrative shortcomings and philosophical shallowness that general audiences may prioritize less. Audience members rewarded the film for satisfying franchise expectations and delivering expected emotional beats. The 57% critics score places the film in mixed territory, while the 84% audience score indicates strong fan satisfaction. Reviewers who appreciated the film emphasized its action choreography and Wong's performance over narrative coherence. Negative reviews consistently cited the underutilization of Macchio and the rushed resolution of Lee's trauma. The film's Rotten Tomatoes consensus captures this divide by acknowledging both strengths and weaknesses. Social media response trended positive, with fan communities celebrating the crossover elements. Critical comparisons to Cobra Kai's nuanced character work highlighted the limitations of feature-length storytelling. The film's place within franchise rankings will likely improve over time as audiences assess it within context rather than against expectations. The legacy implications extend beyond this single film to the franchise's future direction. Success in introducing Ben, Wong establishes a potential new lead for continuing the series theatrically. The unresolved threads, particularly Victor's situation and Connor's fate, provide material for potential sequels. The Johnny Lawrence cameo opens possibilities for further Cobra Kai crossovers in theatrical form. The combined dojo finale suggests future stories could explore the integration of multiple martial arts traditions. Streaming and theatrical coexistence may define the franchise's distribution strategy going forward. The film's moderate budget and box office suggest a sustainable model for continued production. Fan appetite for legacy character appearances indicates value in maintaining connections to past iterations. The introduction of Kung Fu alongside karate expands the franchise's thematic and stylistic range. Li Fang's character arc establishes template for future protagonists dealing with psychological depth beyond basic underdog narratives. The cultural impact, while less than the original film's phenomenon, maintains the franchise's presence in popular conversation. Discussion of the film sparked renewed interest in previous installments across streaming platforms. The crossover concept influenced how other franchises consider their own legacy sequel strategies. Young audiences exposed to the franchise through this film may seek out earlier entries, expanding the fan base. The representation of Chinese-American experience through Dr. Fong and Li adds diversity to the franchise's perspective. Martial arts schools reported increased enrollment following the film's release, continuing a tradition dating to 1984. The film's treatment of trauma and grief contributed to broader conversations about mental health in action cinema. Critical discussion of Macchio's limited role sparked debate about legacy character utilization across Hollywood. The film's financial performance provides data points for studios considering similar crossover projects. Social media discourse around the Zabka cameo demonstrated continued appetite for Cobra Kai character interactions. The direction by Jonathan Entwistle represents his first major studio feature after acclaimed television work. Entwistle's visual style, developed on shows like The End of the F******ing World, translates to family-friendly material through adjusted tone. His work with young actors benefits from television experience that emphasizes performance over spectacle. The balance between action and character reflects Entwistle's background in emotionally grounded genre material. His collaboration with the Hong Kong action team produced fights that integrate with narrative rather than interrupting it. Entwistle's handling of the archival Morita footage shows respect for franchise history while integrating it organically. The director's commentary on home release will likely illuminate choices about pacing and editing that critics questioned. His work with Chan and Macchio created the natural chemistry that anchors the film's best moments. Entwistle's future projects will benefit from the experience of managing complex franchise expectations. The film demonstrates his ability to work within studio systems while maintaining distinctive visual identity. The screenplay by Rob Lieber, faces the challenge of serving multiple masters across franchise history. Lieber's previous work on family films like Peter Rabbit prepared him for balancing humor with emotional stakes. The script structure attempts to honor three distinct continuities while establishing new elements. Dialogue for legacy characters required consultation with Cobra Kai writers to maintain consistency. Lee's character arc provides emotional spine that supports the franchise connections. The Victor subplot, while criticized, attempts to expand thematic range beyond tournament narratives. Lieber's treatment of trauma reflects contemporary understanding of PTSD while remaining accessible to younger viewers. The script's efficiency at 94 pages necessitated compression that critics noted in final product. Rewrites during production likely responded to feedback from Chon and Macchio about their characters. The final shooting script represents compromise between artistic ambition and commercial requirements. The action choreography supervised by the Hong Kong team represents the film's strongest element according to critical consensus. Fight scenes prioritize character expression through movement, with Lee's style evolving as he heals psychologically. The fusion of kung fu and karate required choreographers fluent in both traditions working together. Training sequences avoid the music video aesthetic through emphasis on physical reality rather than quick cuts. The tournament fights differentiate opponents through distinct styles that challenge Lee in varied ways. Chan's fight scenes, while limited, demonstrate the intelligence and humor that defined his career. Wong's physical preparation allowed choreographers to design sequences beyond basic capability. The final dragon kick required weeks of practice to execute safely while maintaining visual impact. Multiple fight scenes play in extended takes that allow audiences to appreciate performer skill. The choreography's success suggests continued viability for martial arts cinema in contemporary Hollywood. The film's place within the broader Karate Kid franchise will be debated by fans for years to come. Some viewers appreciate the ambitious crossover concept despite execution flaws. Others prefer the focused narratives of original films or Cobra Kai's serialized depth. The film's position as theatrical follow-up to streaming series creates unique challenges of continuity and accessibility. Future franchise installments will likely learn from this film's balance of elements. The introduction of Li Fong expands the protagonist tradition beyond Daniel and Dre. Jackie Chan's continued involvement anchors the franchise's Asian representation and martial arts authenticity. Ralph Macchio's participation, however limited, legitimizes the film for purists. The Johnny Lawrence cameo connects to Cobra Kai's successful character work. The film's ultimate legacy may be as transitional piece between eras rather than standalone classic. The narrative architecture employs a sophisticated system of parallel journeys that allows multiple characters to undergo significant development within the constrained runtime, with Lee's external tournament preparation mirrored by Victor's internal struggle to reclaim dignity. Daniel's reflection on his own mentorship history, with Mr. Miyagi providing philosophical counterpoint to Han's teachings about flow and acceptance, and even Connor's aggressive pursuit of victory revealing cracks in his confidence that suggest deeper insecurities beneath the champion's facade. The screenplay distributes its thematic weight across these interconnected arcs so that when Lee finally achieves his breakthrough, the victory resonates not merely as personal triumph, but as collective healing for everyone who invested in his journey. Dr. Fong's transformation from fearful mother to proud spectator represents perhaps the most subtle yet essential character evolution, as her willingness to trust Lee's judgment after months of prohibition demonstrates that healing occurs not only for trauma survivors, but for those who love them. The film's treatment of New York City as character rather than mere setting extends beyond establishing shots into meaningful integration with plot, as Lee's initial disorientation gradually transforms into mastery of urban spaces that parallels his martial arts development. Subway sequences become training grounds for balance and awareness. Crowded sidewalks test his ability to maintain center under distraction, and the vertical geography of apartment buildings provides new angles for understanding how traditional techniques apply to modern environments. This environmental integration reaches its peak during the tournament's final moments, when Lee draws upon lessons learned from navigating city chaos to read Connor's patterns amid the arena's sensory overload. The screenplay's attention to such shijia demonstrates understanding that martial arts philosophy extends beyond dojo walls into every aspect of living, a principle Mr. Miyagi exemplified, and that both Han and Daniel work to instill in their shared student. The film's exploration of cultural identity operates on multiple levels simultaneously, beginning with Lee's position as Chinese immigrant navigating American adolescence, extending through Han's role as bridge between Eastern tradition and Western adaptation, and culminating in Daniel's journey from appropriating Okinawan culture to genuinely understanding its philosophical depths after decades of practice. Lee's struggle to maintain connection to his heritage while adapting to new surroundings manifests in small but significant choices. From the Mandarin phrases he exchanges with his mother to the way he instinctively bows before entering spaces, habits that mark him as different even as he works to fit in. The screenplay avoids simplistic binaries about cultural authenticity by showing how Han himself has evolved since the 2010 film, incorporating American influences into his teaching while maintaining core principles. Daniel's conversations with Han reveal how much he has learned since Mr. Miyagi's passing, particularly his recognition that karate's Japanese origins represent only one branch of a larger martial arts family tree. The film's treatment of fusion extends beyond fighting techniques into food, music, and social customs, with Victor's Pizza Shop becoming unlikely meeting ground where Italian-American tradition meets Chinese culinary influence through shared meals that transcend cultural boundaries. Mia's curiosity about Lee's background opens conversations about identity that feel organic rather than instructional, as teenagers naturally explore each other's differences when given authentic connection. The screenplay avoids the trap of treating Chinese culture as exotic spectacle, instead presenting it through Lee's everyday experiences of homesickness, pride, and the complicated navigation between his mother's expectations and his own emerging sense of self. The mentorship dynamics between Han, Daniel, and Lee create a triangulated relationship that allows for comparative exploration of teaching philosophies without reducing either approach to caricature. Han's method emphasizes indirection, allowing Lee to discover principles through experience rather than explicit instruction, while Daniel tends toward more direct communication born from his own journey of learning through Mr. Miyagi's sometimes frustrating obliqueness. Their occasional disagreements about how to handle Lee's trauma reflect different cultural approaches to psychological healing, with Han advocating patient acceptance of emotional wounds and Daniel pushing for active confrontation of fears. Lee's position between these two father figures creates moments of comic tension when he receives conflicting instructions, but more importantly allows him to synthesize approaches into something uniquely his own. The film subtly suggests that Han and Daniel also learn from each other through this process, with Han incorporating some of Daniel's directness into later scenes and Daniel demonstrating new patience learned from observing Han's quiet persistence. Their shared history, revealed through conversations during the road trip to New York, establishes that both men have faced similar challenges with previous students, creating humility that prevents either from claiming exclusive access to wisdom. The screenplay's treatment of Mr. Miyagi's legacy through archival footage and Daniel's memories avoids the trap of treating him as saint, instead showing a complex man whose teachings emerged from his own struggles with loss, displacement, and the violence of war. This nuanced portrayal allows the film to honor the original while acknowledging that no single teacher possesses all answers, a humility essential to the fusion concept. The tournament structure serves narrative purposes beyond providing climactic action, functioning as crucible where every character's journey reaches point of crisis and potential resolution. The bracket system forces Lee to face progressively challenging opponents whose styles test specific aspects of his training. With early matches emphasizing the Kung Fu foundation, he thought he had lost, and later bouts requiring integration of Daniel's karate principles. Each opponent represents not merely physical challenge, but philosophical question about martial arts purpose. From the wrestler who asks whether competition differs from combat to the kickboxer, whose commercial approach raises questions about martial arts as business. Connor's journey through the bracket runs parallel to Lee's, and the film takes care to show his victories as technically impressive even as his unsportsmanlike conduct reveals character flaws that will ultimately contribute to his defeat. The tournament audience functions as collective character, their reactions guiding viewer emotional response, while also representing the community that martial arts can create when practiced with integrity. Lee's mother watches from increasingly close positions as the tournament progresses, her journey from distant observer to front-row participant mirroring her emotional investment in his recovery. Victor's hospital bed viewing party, attended by fellow patients and nurses drawn into his story, expands the tournament's significance beyond personal triumph into communal celebration. The announcer's hyperbolic commentary provides comic relief, while also satirizing the commercialization of martial arts that the film gently critiques throughout. Tournament officials range from scrupulously fair to subtly corrupt, reflecting the real-world variation in competitive environments that young athletes must navigate. The film's treatment of violence distinguishes it from many contemporary action pictures through emphasis on its psychological consequences, rather than mere spectacle. Lee's trauma response to his brother's death manifests not as generic PTSD, but as specific physical paralysis during moments that trigger memory, a condition depicted through subjective camera work that immerses viewers in his dissociation. The boxing match where Victor is hospitalized shows the aftermath of violence with unflinching attention to medical reality, from the ambulance arrival to the hospital scenes where Lee must confront consequences of his inaction. Han's teachings emphasize that martial arts exist primarily to avoid violence rather than enable it, a principle demonstrated when he resolves potential conflicts through presence and wisdom rather than combat. Daniel's stories about Mr. Miyagi reinforce this philosophy, showing how the original master used karate to end fights quickly and mercifully rather than prolong suffering. The tournament setting inherently raises questions about consensual violence and its relationship to self-defense, questions the film addresses through Lee's internal conflict about whether competition honors or betrays his brother's memory. Connor's aggression stems from different source, possibly the pressure of O'Shea's expectations or his own need for external validation, suggesting that violence without philosophical grounding leads to emptiness regardless of victory. The final fight's choreography emphasizes control and precision rather than brutality, with Lee's winning technique designed to end the match decisively without causing unnecessary harm. This philosophical consistency across action sequences demonstrates the filmmaker's understanding that martial arts cinema carries responsibility beyond entertainment. The production's attention to martial arts authenticity extends beyond choreography into the physical preparation required of every cast member, with weeks of training ensuring that even background performers move correctly for their characters' supposed skill levels. Ben Wong's prior martial arts experience provided foundation, but he trained extensively in both kung fu and karate styles to embody the fusion concept authentically rather than through editing trickery. Jackie Chan's involvement brought not only his performance, but his action direction experience, as he consulted on sequences to ensure they honored both traditions while remaining accessible to general audiences. Ralph Macchio, despite limited fight time, trained to ensure his movements reflected Daniel's decades of continued practice since the original films. Joshua Jackson's boxing sequences required specific training to distinguish his character's style from the martial arts surrounding it, creating visual differentiation that reinforces thematic distinctions between combat sports. Aramis Knight developed a karate style for Connor that emphasized the aggression and showmanship distinguishing tournament champions from more philosophical practitioners. The Hong Kong action team supervised by Chon veterans brought decades of experience to fight design, ensuring each sequence told story through movement rather than merely providing spectacle between dialogue scenes. Training montages were shot progressively throughout production, allowing Wong's actual skill development to inform the footage rather than requiring fake early incompetence. This commitment to authenticity extends to the sound design, where each strike carries specific tonal quality distinguishing kung fu techniques from karate equivalents. The film's relationship to the Cobra Kai series represents unprecedented continuity between streaming and theatrical storytelling, with character development from the show directly informing Daniel's appearance without requiring viewers to have watched 6 seasons. References to specific events from the series, such as Daniel's reconciliation with Johnny or his expanded dojo network, are woven into dialogue in ways that reward dedicated viewers while remaining comprehensible to newcomers. William Zabka's cameo functions as both comedy and continuity, showing how Johnny's character has evolved since his Cobra Kai journey while maintaining the essential personality that made him memorable in 1984. The Miyagi-Do pizza shop joke originated in Cobra Kai fan communities before being incorporated into the film, demonstrating how franchise creators listen to audience engagement when developing new material. Daniel's conversations with Han about his experiences teaching in the Valley reference specific students and situations from the series, expanding the universe's sense of lived history. The decision to set the film after Cobra Kai's conclusion allows it to serve as epilogue while remaining accessible as standalone entry, a balancing act that required careful script development. Johnny's brief appearance suggests ongoing connection between his world and Daniel's, leaving room for future crossovers without committing to specific narrative directions. The series' influence extends to tonal elements, particularly the willingness to find humor in character flaws while maintaining fundamental respect for their journeys. This integration of streaming continuity into theatrical release represents experimental approach to franchise management that other properties may study for years to come. The cinematography's evolution throughout the film reflects Lee's psychological journey through carefully calibrated visual choices that reward attentive viewing. Early Beijing sequences employ classical composition and steady cameras that suggest the ordered world Lee inhabited before trauma disrupted everything. The stabbing sequence introduces handheld immediacy that returns during moments of stress throughout the film, creating visual language for psychological disturbance. New York's initial presentation emphasizes overwhelming scale through wide lenses and Dutch angles that convey Lee's disorientation in unfamiliar environment. As Lee begins training with Han, shots gradually stabilize, suggesting returning psychological equilibrium even before explicit narrative confirmation. Daniel's arrival introduces warmer color palette that contrasts with earlier New York coolness, visually representing the additional emotional support his presence provides. Training sequences employ fluid camera movements that follow action rather than cutting away, allowing audiences to appreciate Wong's physical capabilities while maintaining spatial coherence. Tournament coverage shifts among multiple camera positions, but maintains consistent visual language that distinguishes it from earlier handheld chaos. The final fight employs slow motion strategically, emphasizing key moments without overusing technique that might diminish its impact. Color grading throughout maintains subtle shifts that reinforce emotional arcs without drawing attention to technical choices. The sound design's layering creates immersive environments that ground fantastic elements in auditory reality while supporting emotional beats through subtle musical integration. Beijing street sounds establish cultural specificity through layered ambient audio including temple bells, market vendors, and the distinctive rhythm of Mandarin conversations. New York's soundscape overwhelms initially with sirens, construction, and multiple languages competing for attention, gradually integrating as Lee adapts to his environment. Fight scenes emphasize impact sounds recorded from actual martial arts contact rather than library effects, lending authenticity to each strike and block. The score, composed by team including veterans of previous franchise entries, weaves themes from original film into new compositions without relying on obvious quotation. Silence during traumatic flashbacks creates visceral discomfort that communicates Lee's dissociation more effectively than dialogue could. Tournament sequences capture crowd reactions from multiple microphone positions, creating sense of spatial depth that places viewers within the arena. Training montages balance instruction dialogue with musical progression that tracks Lee's improvement without requiring explicit commentary. The final fight's sound design prioritizes fighters' breathing and impacts, creating intimacy within larger venue that emphasizes personal stakes over spectacle. Environmental sounds like distant traffic or building hum remind audiences of characters' place within living cities throughout dialogue scenes. The editing structure, despite critical concerns about rushed pacing, demonstrates sophisticated understanding of how to balance multiple narrative threads within commercial constraints. Cross-cutting between Lee's training and Victor's recovery maintains parallel momentum, while drawing thematic connections between physical and psychological healing. Tournament sequences compress preliminary matches through montage that shows Lee's progression while preserving key character moments that advance emotional arcs. Flashback integration employs visual and auditory cues, including color desaturation and muffled sound, that prevent timeline confusion without heavy-handed transitions. The move between Beijing and New York occurs through match cuts emphasizing emotional continuity across geography, such as Lee bowing in his wuguan dissolving to Lee bowing before school locker. Training sequences build through accumulating skill demonstrations that show progress without requiring real-time documentation of every practice session. The final fight extends through strategic slow motion and reaction shots that build tension while maintaining momentum toward climax. Post-victory sequences allow breathing room before emotional resolutions, with extended shots of character reactions that process triumph without dialogue. Credits placement allows Zabka cameo without disrupting narrative closure, rewarding patient viewers while providing natural conclusion for those who leave earlier. Editing rhythm shifts from deliberate early pace to accelerated tournament sequences, reflecting Lee's journey from contemplative healing to decisive action. The costume design contributes significantly to character development through choices that communicate personality, journey, and cultural positioning without expository dialogue. Lee's Beijing wardrobe features traditional elements, including Mandarin collars and natural fabrics that shift to American casual, whereas he adapts, though he retains specific pieces that connect him to home. Mr. Han's clothing maintains consistency with his 2010 appearance while showing time's passage through subtle updates, suggesting character who values tradition without rejecting change. Daniel's wardrobe echoes Cobra Kai costumes while incorporating elements reflecting his successful dojo business, communicating professional stability without sacrificing approachability. Victor's worn clothing and limited wardrobe reflect financial struggles without reducing him to stereotype, each piece showing signs of careful maintenance that suggests pride despite circumstances. Connor's competition attire emphasizes his dojo affiliation through branding, while casual clothing marks him as privileged athlete through designer pieces and current styles. Dr. Fong's professional wardrobe communicates medical career through practical sophistication, while home clothing reveals maternal warmth through softer fabrics and family photos incorporated into design. Mia's fashion choices reflect contemporary teenage styles through specific brand references that will date film but currently read as authentic. Tournament competitors wear uniforms that distinguish schools while maintaining practical functionality, with design variations suggesting different training philosophies before characters speak. Color coding throughout allows audiences to track alliances and rivalries during group sequences, with warm colors associated with protagonists and cool tones gradually warming as antagonists reveal humanity. The film's treatment of New York locations demonstrates understanding that city functions as character requiring introduction, development, and integration into narrative. Establishing shots move beyond postcard images to specific neighborhoods that reflect immigrant experience central to Lee's journey. The school location in Queens places Lee within most diverse borough, surrounded by fellow immigrants whose experiences mirror his own. Victor's Pizza Shop in Brooklyn represents working-class New York tradition threatened by gentrification and economic pressure, stakes that resonate beyond martial arts plot. Training sequences utilize parks, rooftops, and community centers that show how martial arts integrate into urban life rather than requiring special spaces. Subway scenes capture distinctive sensory experience of New York transit while providing opportunities for Lee to practice balance and awareness amid chaos. The tournament venue at Barclays Center grounds climax in recognizable location that lends authenticity to fictional competition. Night shooting captures New York's distinctive lighting and energy, differentiating it from filmed-on soundstage approximations. Weather variation throughout production, from autumn crispness to winter chill, provides temporal markers that track story duration while adding production value. Location choices consistently reflect character socioeconomic realities, avoiding glamorization while finding beauty in urban authenticity. The supporting performances enrich the film beyond its central relationships, creating a world that feels populated by real people rather than plot functions. Victor's Pizza Shop regulars, played by New York character actors, provide comic relief while establishing community that Lee gradually joins. School background performers react to Lee's presence with authentic curiosity and wariness, creating social environment that feels observed rather than designed. Tournament competitors in early rounds receive brief characterization through behavior and appearance, suggesting lives continuing beyond frame. O'Shea's associates, though minimally characterized, establish threatening presence through physicality and silence rather than dialogue. Hospital staff attending Victor create brief moments of human connection that expand story's emotional range. The tournament announcers, played by sports broadcasting veterans, bring authentic cadence to commentary that sells events' significance. Fellow patients in Victor's hospital room become invested in Lee's journey through his storytelling, creating audience surrogate within narrative. Daniel's students glimpsed during California scenes suggest continuation of his teaching philosophy beyond franchise focus. These cumulative performances create texture that rewards repeat viewing and supports central narrative without demanding attention. The philosophical framework draws from multiple traditions while remaining accessible to viewers without martial arts background. Taoist concepts of Wu Wei appear through Han's teaching about effortlessness, demonstrated when Lee achieves breakthrough by relaxing rather than trying harder. Zen Buddhist influence emerges in meditation sequences, showing Lee learning to observe thoughts without attachment, skill directly applicable to trauma management. Confucian emphasis on filial piety informs Lee's relationship with mother and respect for elders, creating cultural specificity distinguishing him from previous protagonists. Miyagi-Do philosophy derived from Okinawan traditions emphasizes karate as peace-seeking rather than violence-enabling, principle Daniel articulates through stories about his mentor. The film's fusion concept extends philosophical synthesis beyond fighting techniques, suggesting wisdom traditions enrich each other through respectful exchange. Western psychological concepts of trauma and recovery integrate with Eastern approaches rather than replacing them, creating therapeutic pluralism reflecting contemporary understanding. Han's teaching about circular movement applies to emotional as well as physical realms, suggesting that healing requires returning to wounds from new angles. Daniel's emphasis on balance extends beyond physical stance into life priorities. Lesson Lee applies when choosing tournament participation over continued avoidance. The film's philosophical ambition, while imperfectly realized, represents genuine attempt to honor martial arts traditions rather than merely exploit them for action sequences. The commercial considerations shaping final product manifest in choices that balance artistic ambition with market realities facing mid-budget franchise films. The 94-minute runtime reflects studio confidence in efficient storytelling while potentially sacrificing character development that might have enriched emotional stakes. PG-13 rating maximizes target audience by allowing preteens access while maintaining edge through trauma content rather than explicit violence. Jackie Chan's prominent marketing placement acknowledges his international box office draw, while his actual screen time reflects physical limitations of age. Ralph Macchio's reduced role may reflect budget constraints or scheduling conflicts, though marketing suggested more substantial participation. The crossover concept maximizes franchise appeal by attracting fans of all iterations, while potentially confusing viewers unfamiliar with any previous entry. Tournament structure provides familiar framework that tests well with preview audiences while limiting narrative innovation. Victor subplot's partial resolution may reflect testing indicating audience preference for focused climax over secondary arc completion. William Zabka's cameo functions as sequel hook while providing immediate fan satisfaction. These commercial calculations, while constraining artistic possibilities, enabled production to reach theaters rather than streaming exclusively. The film's engagement with contemporary social issues extends beyond cultural identity into economic anxiety, educational pressure, and community fragmentation. Victor's debt crisis reflects real economic precarity facing working-class Americans, with medical bills and predatory lending creating traps that talent alone cannot escape. Lee's educational experience includes pressure to succeed as immigrant child, expectation that Dr. Fong articulates through concerns about college applications and future prospects. The school social hierarchy depicted includes bullying dynamics that resonate with contemporary concerns about mental health and adolescent development. O'Shea's loan shark operation represents exploitation that preys on vulnerable communities, connecting to broader conversations about economic justice. Tournament commercialization critiques how martial arts traditions become co-opted by corporate interests, theme particularly relevant as MMA and competitive karate grow in popularity. Community responses to crisis, from pizza shop customers rallying around Victor to hospital staff supporting his recovery, suggest alternative to fragmentation through mutual aid. The film's resolution emphasizing collective healing over individual triumph offers subtle political commentary about interdependence. These social dimensions prevent the film from retreating into pure escapism, grounding martial arts fantasy in recognizable reality. The action choreography's evolution throughout the film traces Lee's psychological journey through movement vocabulary that becomes increasingly integrated as healing progresses. Early fight scenes show technically proficient but emotionally disconnected techniques, as Lee fights from memory rather than presence. The alley rescue of Victor demonstrates capability without psychological investment, efficient but mechanical. Training sequences with Han emphasize rediscovering feeling through movement, with Lee learning to breathe properly before attempting complex techniques. Daniel's arrival introduces new movement vocabulary that initially clashes with Lee's established patterns, creating physical representation of internal conflict. Breakthrough moments occur when Lee stops thinking about technique and allows body to respond, visualized through fluid camera movements that match his flow state. Tournament fights show progressive integration, with early rounds emphasizing one style before Lee learns to switch seamlessly. The final match against Connor represents complete synthesis, with Lee moving between approaches without conscious choice. Victory pose, modified dragon kick held in crane positions echo, visually represents fusion achieved. Wang's physical performance throughout communicates this evolution through subtle changes in posture, breathing, and facial expression during action. The film's place within broader martial arts cinema tradition extends beyond Karate Kid franchise into conversation with classics of genre. Bruce Lee's philosophy of absorbing useful principles regardless of source echoes in the fusion concept that unifies Han and Daniel's teachings. Jackie Chan's earlier films, particularly those blending comedy with authentic martial arts, inform Mr. Han's character and action style. The tournament structure recalls countless martial arts films from the 36th Chamber of Shaolin to Best of the Best, connecting this installment to tradition rather than inventing new framework. Training montage format evolved from earlier films while maintaining essential structure that audiences expect and enjoy. The mentor-student relationship central to narrative has roots in chivalric fiction extending far beyond cinema. Final fight choreography emphasizing technique over brutality connects to Bruce Lee's philosophy that martial arts excellence requires control rather than destruction. Cultural exchange theme resonates with films like Enter the Dragon that explored East-West encounter through martial arts framework. The film's awareness of this tradition manifests through visual references and philosophical continuity that reward genre knowledge. The production design's attention to cultural authenticity extends to consultation with martial arts masters from both kung fu and karate traditions during development. The Wuguan set in Beijing incorporates architectural elements specific to traditional training spaces, including ancestor altar and equipment storage reflecting real practice. Mr. Han's teaching methods depicted on screen were reviewed by cultural consultants to ensure they reflected authentic approaches rather than cinematic invention. Miyagi-Do Dojo set builds on established franchise design while incorporating elements reflecting Daniel's evolution since original films. Tournament venue design balances practical requirements for action filming with authenticity to competitive martial arts events. Costume details, from competition uniforms to training gear, were sourced from actual martial arts suppliers rather than costume department approximations. Prop weapons and training equipment reflect historical accuracy while meeting safety requirements for film production. The film's dedication to authenticity extends beyond visual elements into dialogue about martial arts history and philosophy reviewed by experts. This commitment grounds fantastic elements in reality that enhances credibility for knowledgeable viewers. The sound team's approach to martial arts audio required extensive research into actual impact sounds produced by different techniques and body positions. Kung Fu strikes typically produce different acoustic signatures than karate techniques due to body mechanics and target selection. Training sessions were recorded to capture authentic breathing patterns that vary with technique execution. Tournament crowd audio blends recordings from actual sporting events with controlled sessions to create authentic atmosphere. The score's integration with action sequences required precise timing to emphasize impact without overwhelming natural sound. Dialogue clarity during fight scenes presented challenges addressed through strategic microphone placement and post-production balancing. Environmental audio from Beijing and New York locations grounds scenes in specific places through distinctive ambient signatures. Sound effects for traumatic flashbacks employ distortion and muffling that communicate subjective experience rather than literal representation. The final mix balances multiple audio elements to guide viewer attention while maintaining immersive realism. The visual effects philosophy emphasizes enhancement rather than replacement of practical action, with CGI used primarily for safety enhancement and environmental extension. Fight scenes required occasional wire removal and impact enhancement while preserving Wang and Knight's actual performances. Tournament crowd replication extends practical crowd footage through digital duplication, creating arena scale without requiring thousands of extras. Beijing and New York establishing shots combine location photography with digital enhancement for visual consistency. Flashback sequences employ subtle effects to distinguish memory from present action without heavy-handed stylization. The modified dragon kick's execution combines Wang's physical performance with digital enhancement for maximum visual impact while maintaining safety. Color grading throughout provides emotional guidance while preserving naturalistic base essential to franchise aesthetic. The film's visual effects budget, modest by blockbuster standards, focused on quality over quantity, resulting in seamless integration where effects support rather than distract. This restraint reflects understanding that franchise appeal rests on character and action authenticity rather than spectacle. The film's release strategy navigated challenging theatrical landscape for mid-budget films through careful positioning and marketing. Opening during period with limited direct competition allowed sustained theatrical run despite mixed reviews. International release timing varied by region to maximize cultural relevance, with Asian markets receiving film after Cannes promotional tour. Streaming availability window following theatrical release balances traditional exhibition with contemporary consumption patterns. Marketing campaign emphasized crossover concept through trailers featuring both Chan and Macchio prominently, managing expectations that contributed to critical disappointment about screen time distribution. Social media engagement targeted franchise fans through behind-scenes content and cast interactions. Review embargo timing allowed positive word-of-mouth from fan screenings to precede critical consensus. The film's box office performance, while modest, met studio expectations for sustainable franchise continuation. Home entertainment release includes extended features addressing some criticisms through deleted scenes and commentary. The legacy implications for Ben Wong's career extend beyond this film into potential franchise leadership and broader industry opportunities. His performance demonstrated capability to carry action franchise while delivering emotional depth required for dramatic scenes. Industry response to his work has generated offers for similar projects, expanding representation for Asian American leads in action cinema. Wong's martial arts background, combined with dramatic training, positions him for versatility across genres. His collaboration with Jackie Chan provides mentorship extending beyond this production into ongoing career guidance.